This video is about the question, is this behavior, relationship, or person abusive? The answer to this question almost always turns out to be yes. But the person asking it usually doesn't see that for a little while until they explain their situation and the background details to whoever they're talking to. You would think that it's like 50-50, where some of the situations turn out that it's abusive and some of the situations turn out that it was just normal couple arguing or, a normal relationship. But in fact, if you have to actually ask this question, is this behavior or person, etc., abusive? It's almost always yes. Like 95 times out of 100 when I've seen that asked on, for example, online forums, it always turns out to be yes once the person actually starts talking. We're going to cover 3 reasons in this video why that's the case, and we're starting right now. So the first reason that it usually turns out that the answer is yes to that question is that the person who's asking it is only describing about 10% of the actual situation. For example, somebody brings up their partner making an overly critical comment to them and asks, is this abusive? When people ask about the context for the comment, the person explains that their partner put their face in their face and shouted at them. The partner took the keys to their car and said they couldn't leave. The partner smashed something on the floor, etc. But the first thing that the person asked about when they said, is this abusive, is not the whole situation. That's the first reason. There may be many reasons why people do this. Maybe they're not comfortable talking about their partner being abusive, and so they purposely or subconsciously leave out some details. Maybe they actually didn't notice the details, depending on what they were. For whatever reason, it's almost always the case that when someone asks, is this abusive, there are like 10 or 15 other things going on besides the first thing that they actually brought up. This is why it's so good to talk to friends, family, or even anonymous strangers if you are in that type of a situation. Other people who aren't in that situation and ask you some questions about the situation will immediately see when you describe what else is going on that it actually is an abusive situation, and that's probably going to be very helpful for you to understand what you're dealing with. And the second reason that the answer is usually yes when people ask the question, is this abusive, is that they're usually subconsciously making excuses for their partner. For example, people may think, what my partner did would normally be abusive, whether it was shouting or throwing something, etc. But because I criticized them first, or because I did something wrong first, that means that it's not abusive. The person might not come out and say this, but when you hear them describe the situation, you can tell that they're verbally making excuses for their partner by saying, well, they got really upset and threw something, but that's because I did something to set them off. That is not healthy thinking, and that does not actually make the behavior not abusive. If somebody is crossing certain lines, like getting physical, threatening, controlling, throwing something, etc., it doesn't matter what you did that triggered that behavior or that they said triggered that behavior. It's still an abusive behavior. I don't care if you forgot to load the dishwasher. I don't care if you said something that wasn't very nice. I don't care if you, had too many drinks. It doesn't matter what it was. There are certain lines that it's not okay to cross. And normal relationships involve arguments and mistakes and apologies and making up and all of that. They do not involve people crossing the line into abusive territory. So when people describe their situation and they're asking, is this behavior abusive? They might list out 7 or 8 things that are all abusive, but they aren't counting them as abusive because they weren't perfect. Now, the third and final reason that the answer to this question, is this abusive, is almost always yes, is that if you have to ask this question, some part of your subconscious knows that something was wrong. You might not be able to put your finger on it or put it into words right away, but usually it's because there was something about it that was scary, intimidating, controlling, or crossed a boundary that you kind of know isn't normal for people to cross. You should really trust that instinct that you have. If you had to ask if it was abuse, this is one of the biggest reasons why the answer is usually yes. The other concepts that we talked about in the video will be helpful for identifying exactly why it was abusive or how it was abusive. Talking to other people will also be really helpful in identifying why or how it was abusive. But put it simply, if something made you that uncomfortable that you had to ask, is this abuse? The answer is that something probably is wrong. If you are at home watching this and you don't have anyone, friends or family that you feel comfortable talking to about the situation for any reason, I encourage you to go to reddit.com or another anonymous online forum and go to the subforum for domestic violence or abusive relationships or toxic relationships. Make an anonymous username and just post your story. You can delete it later and ask some of the other users if that behavior is abusive or toxic. That's really going to be eye-opening for you in that situation. I also encourage you to just read the other stories that other people post in those situations, which might help you to see the pattern of the types of responses that people get when they do that. And if you do think your situation is abusive, please feel free to check out some of the other content on this channel, which covers common emotional reactions to finding that out, common questions such as can abusive people change, and common emotions to process after leaving an abusive relationship.